Hello, hello, good evening. It's Monica from Life is Art, and this is the Friday 3:30 p.m. demo at the Miniatures Around the World online crop. And we have been having a great day. We had a fun chat and craft this afternoon, and creating a card this morning as well. This evening, I guess it's evening, we are going to be doing some scrapbooking. And from the Stampin' Up! Annual Catalog, we're going to be looking at the Country Woods collection. Let me just find that here. And you can see here some lovely items that have been made using the Country Woods collection. We're going to be looking specifically at the Country Woods DSP as well as the Country Birdhouse stamp and die bundle. And those are really fun, and I've been just waiting to get into those. So I thought during our miniatures crop from around the world would be a perfect time, because in my mind a birdhouse is a bit like a dollhouse. Everything is done miniature sized, right? Because it's a house for a bird. And there's a very special place near where I grew up in Prince Edward County, and just on the outskirts of Picton, called Birdhouse City. And I've got some photos here from Birdhouse City, so we're going to be scrapbooking those today. And we're going to start out with a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock for our card base. This is Night of Navy, which is a beautiful dark navy cardstock. I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive onto the back here so it doesn't move around while we're creating. And just line it up. Keep it in one spot. There we go. Okay, now I have a lot of photos to bring in, but before I get started on the photos, I want to show you the stamp set and the dies up close. So here is the Country Birdhouse stamp set, and you can see on here that there is a birdhouse that you can stamp out. There's a cute little bird, there's some splatter, there's a little bit of wood grain, so you can add wood grain texture to parts of your birdhouse. There are some florals, there's a little bit of bordering happening, and then of course there's some sentiments that are wonderful for cards, hoping you have the best day ever. Happy birthday, hello friend. And so those are the stamps that come with this collection. Then the dies for the Country Birdhouse. I'm going to pull that out and take a look. You can see that there is a die that cuts out the shape of the birdhouse. There's also a die that cuts out some little gingerbread detailing, on the trim. There's a solid thin piece. There's a solid thick piece for the roof. Then there's the hole for the birds to come in and out. The little peg that's often below the hole for the birds to land on before they hop in to the birdhouse. There's a post with some curly cues to hold up your birdhouse. There's also a string to hang your birdhouse. And then there are some florals. And these are kind of standalone florals and leaves that can be cut out of colored cardstock or white cardstock and then inked up. But then there's also some shapes that will cut out the florals that are the stamped images from the stamp set. So lots of fun bits and pieces that we can use to create just about anything we want with this set. So let me show you some fun little bits that I have cut out to create my birdhouse. Hey Heather, nice to see you're watching. Hey Diane, good evening. You were just working with this set today. Awesome, you will be well versed in how it works. So before I started adding my different DSP to this, I wanted to start out with a base for my birdhouse. Now originally, I cut out my base. Where did I put it? I've put it away somewhere. I cut out my base in white. And that was all very well and good. I'm just going to put it there so you can see it better. That was all very well and good, except for I wanted to use the die to cut the hole for the birds to go into the birdhouse. And I wanted it to look dark inside. So with white behind it, it just looked like a hole through the hole to birdhouse. So then I switched and I used a black cutout using that large die. Let me grab the dies again. Actually, the dies are here. So I used this largest die to cut out this piece. Then I went to the gorgeous Country Woods DSP. And you know me, I love a wood grain. So I wanted to pull out some fun details from the wood grain. So I cut this lovely wood grain. Looks all distressed, and quite often the birdhouses at Birdhouse City look a little distressed because they're out in the elements year round, and there are people who restore them and take care of them, but they don't get tended to every year. They kind of pick and choose which ones each year will be taken care of. So I cut out the large shape there, and then I used the circle to cut out the hole. So you can see now we have our little hole. Then I used the gingerbready part of the die to cut this darker wood grain and created that little gingerbread scallop for my birdhouse. I'm just setting it there for now. Then I grabbed one of the wood grains that was a bit more distinctly a wood grain, and I used the thicker roof die to cut that out, and that's going to go on top of the house just like that. Then I also got this distressed wood grain that's sort of a mid-brown on white, and cut that out using this piece here, and that can attach here to look like the base of the birdhouse. And then the one thing that I was thinking is if you wanted this to look like a bird feeder as opposed to a birdhouse, you would just leave the hole out or keep it solid and don't put a hole in it. And this large base will make it look like a bird feeder, which is pretty awesome. Then I also used the same sort of wood grain. It's not exactly the same because I'm working with little bits and pieces at this point, to cut out the post for my birdhouse. So you can see how all the bits and pieces fit together. I'm not going to do all the die cutting on camera because I know that you know, for the most part, the general idea of how to do die cutting, right? I'm pretty sure we can all figure that out. So let's assemble our birdhouse. And let me grab a scrap piece of cardstock here, if I can, just so I can see that dark base. I'm going to scooch those over. So there's our base. I can't seem to pick anything up today. And we're going to start out first with our largest piece because everything else kind of attaches to it. We can go ahead and add that on. We're just going to use a little bit of liquid glue so we can get into all the little nooks and crannies and around the circle. There we go. Just a very little bit of glue. And then we're going to layer this up. Now, if you ever have problems making sure things line up, what I do is I pick it up and I put my fingers along the edges like that, and that helps to just squish the little bit of wiggle room that you have with liquid glue, and it helps to get everything lined up because your fingers just push those two pieces of paper into the exact spot they need to be. Okay, then let's add our bottom onto our birdhouse. I could actually use either side of this die cut. Both sides are pretty, but I'm going to go for the lighter one because it seems to fit. And again, if I have trouble lining this one up, I'll just use my fingers and pinch on either side, and that, oops, and I slid it. That's also a good reason to have a cardstock base. I could have just gone with the pattern paper and use that as the base, but there's a bit of thickness there from the cardstock that allows me to pick it up and kind of manipulate everything. Then we're going to add our thicker piece of the roof, like that. You want to make sure that you have enough glue, but not so much glue that it smushes everywhere. We don't want smushing. So then we just line that up and glue it down like so. This one's a little bit harder because it's not necessarily something on the other side you could pinch it up against. So there we go. And then let's put on our little scallopy bit. Now, if you were cutting cardstock with this and you made your sandwich the right way, this little scallopy bit also has little indentations, like little circly indentations all along all those little scallops. But because I used DSP and I didn't put the sandwich in for doing that sort of embossing, it's not going to show up, because I figured it's not going to show up anyway because the wood grain is there. So there we go. We've got our birdhouse put together. I'm going to add this later when I put everything together. And I just wanted to show you, I created a second birdhouse as well, but I did it with different papers. And so this one, I used that sort of pinky, salmony, worn off wood grain painted goodness, and then some darker wood here, and then it's pretty much the same wood grain as that for the scallops on this one, because I wanted two different looks of birdhouses, because in Birdhouse City, no two birdhouses are the same. So I wanted to kind of maintain that aspect of the adventure. Now, another little bit of stamping that I'm going to do, and I might as well do it now before I get too far into the project, is I want to use the little bird to stamp out some birds and to create some embellishments. And so I'm going to use the back side of my mat here. I'm going to get a piece of cardstock, and I will show you one of the little birdies that I stamped earlier and colored. There's only one bird in this stamp set, and there's only one die. So I've stamped that up and I've colored it with light and dark boho blue, and then the beak and the feet I colored with Petal pink Stampin Blends. Those are all Stampin Blends that I used. And so I wanted to show you an interesting technique. So this is a demo and a technique all at once. An interesting technique for having something face the other direction. So our bird is facing to the right. But do I want all my birds facing to the right? Probably not. That would get boring. So I want some birds that face to the left. And to do that, there's an interesting technique that you can do. Sometimes you have to try it more than once to get it to work, okay? So be patient with this process. We're going to use our Memento ink, the black. We're going to bring in an extra stamp block, and this is nice and clean, and we're going to just set our stamp block here for a minute. We're going to ink up our bird, like so. We're going to stamp our bird onto the block, and I think I wiggled it a bit, but we'll try it a couple times. Then one thing we can do is go ha and huff onto our block. So we're going to go ha, and then we're going to stamp it onto our cardstock. Now to do this, you're going to want to have a squishy surface that you can push into. And you can see that this does not stamp as clear as just stamping regularly would be. It's a tiny bit lighter. For one thing, you've already transferred ink to this, and some of the ink stays on that block. You can probably see it there. So not all of the ink transfers, and because you're stamping on something that's non-porous, the ink can kind of bead up on it, and so it's not pristine, but it's very close. And so I think we did a good enough job with that one that I don't need to do it again. But that is the process. You ink up your stamp, You stamp it on a second block. Then you go, ha, and you blow that hot air just like you would if you were cleaning your glasses or something like that, you know, or going to write, you know, a little heart on the window in the cold. And then you go ahead and stamp it. Huffing on it helps the ink to transfer a little bit better. And so yes. So we've got this cute little bird now. So we can go ahead and color our bird. Let's just get ourselves repositioned here. Always takes a minute for the video to catch up with me. And we're going to color this bird. Let me see what color. Let's do the pecan pie. So I've got the light pecan pie, Stampin' Blend, and the dark. So I'm going to use the brush tip. And I'm just going to quickly color my bird. One thing that I have found using these, because of the brush tip, it squishes down, it gets nice and fat. You want to keep the point pointed towards your stamped line, because sometimes if you do it a different way and you have the base of the brush pointed towards your stamp line, you tend to squish too hard and then you go out the lines. And sometimes we don't want that. I'm going to come in with the darker one and add a little bit of dark just under here, like that, on the bottom of the wing, a little bit along the feathers there, on the bottom there, and there we go. And then I'm also going to use the Petal pink for the beak and the feet. The beak and the feet, just to add a little bit of color. It's barely noticeable, but it is noticeable. So we're going to do it. Now, the trick with this is, if you are a person who loves to do die cutting, your die will not match up with your bird now because it's the wrong way. There are tricky ways that you can, you know, hold it up to the light, or, you know, if it bleeds through, you can try and line it up, but it's not going to look the same because the die pushes through the paper, and so you're going to have a weird ridge on the front. So in this case, good old fussy cutting to the rescue. We're just going to go ahead and fussy cut out our little birdie with our scissors. You knew that I had to do at least one thing, fussy cutting, all right? And so this is a good excuse to do that because there's no die. Once you flip a stamp around, there's no die for that. Oh, there's my alarm. That's my alarm that says post the next game. So I will do that after we're all done. So for those of you who are waiting for game number 6, it will come. All the way around, up and around the feathers, and around the tail. So there we go. We've fussy cut out our little bird. And really, you know, it's one little bird. It's not a whole lot of effort. We can fussy cut that. Okay, let's start bringing in our photos. And the photos from Birdhouse City are super cute because we've got birdhouses that are made to look like places. Some of them are just in general, so this is Country Store. But some of them are made to look like places in Prince Edward County and other areas too. So this is McPherson House, and it's got a whole bunch of openings for birds to nest in there. There's a real push to help the purple martins nest. And here we have the Crystal Palace, which is a gorgeous building in the fairgrounds in Picton. And it's just beautiful. And it's been around for a long, long time. So, of course, somebody made a replica of it in miniature for Birdhouse City. So we're going to put these first 3 photos on here. And I'm going to go ahead and add some adhesive to the back. And I actually have 6 photos well, technically 7 photos that are going to go on here. So let's do this. I'm not doing any matting. I'm going to use my base page as my matting. I did think about placement of these photos. So this photo is going to go along the left edge, and that's because it's kind of tipping so that it's pointing towards the center of the page. I think I might even grab a ruler for this. I want to line these up at about 1.25 inches from the bottom of the page. So I'm going to put my ruler at 1.25 inches. And I'm also going to leave a little bit of space in between my photos. Not a lot, just a little. So this next one is the McPherson house. Get the backing off. And again, just leaving a tiny little bit of a gap to let some of that Night of Navy shine through. When you're using a lot of photos, you can either use the technique of adding just one mat for all your photos, or you can do what I'm doing here and use the base page just as your photo mat. Totally works either way. Okay, now I have 3 more birdhouses to show you. This one here is a replica of the Picton courthouse. I remember having to go to the Picton courthouse on a field trip at least once, because, you know, you got to see all the historical places from the place you live. And it's infamous for being the last place where there was like a hanging in Ontario or something. And they have the gallows still there, kind of creepy, but you know, it's history. Then we also have Macaulay House, which is a beautiful brick house, and it has been fully restored, and it's a museum. There's also a church next door to it that's a museum, and it's just beautiful. So that's Macaulay House. And then this last one you may recognize as being not from Prince Edward County. It's a very famous landmark. And so we've got the Leaning Tower of Pisa there. There are some really cool birdhouses in Birdhouse City. So if you're ever in Prince Edward County, be sure to look it up. There are helicopters and airplanes and pontoon boats, and there are horses, and you name it. They've got it in Birdhouse City. So let's go ahead and add our next photo. We're going to start over on the right hand side and do basically the same thing. We're going to allow our base page to be our matting, and I'm working off of the photos below, so hopefully I'll line it up somewhat close. I think I left a bigger gap there than the other ones, but that's okay. And then the courthouse, Macaulay House, the Leaning Tower of Pisa. When I was working in the county during my college days at a learning center, my friend and I took this little inchworm, stuffed inchworm, and we took it all around Prince Edward County and took pictures of it in various places, including Birdhouse City. But we had to mention his name was Inch because he was an inchworm. We had to mention that he was a little bit scared visiting Birdhouse City because he's a worm and there were a lot of birds around. So, you know, it was quite a fun thing. All right, then I want to bring in my birdhouses. So this little guy down here, we're going to add it right there like that. So I'm just going to add some adhesive. I could pop this up with foam, some dimensionals, but I'm going to leave it flat because I know a lot of you like to do flat scrapping, and so I like to show that sometimes where we keep it flat. It has a little bit of dimension because there's about 3 layers of paper going on here. But we also need to make sure that we stay within the confines of our base page. So we're going to have to overlap our photo just ever so slightly, and I'm okay with that because this is embellishing, and we can do that with our embellishing. Now I'm going to add some adhesive to our post here, and I'm just going to set the post for now. I'm actually going to tuck it a little bit under this photo, and then this one I'm going to allow to go above like that. So I'm going to stick down my post now because I'm happy with how that looks. Try and keep it in somewhat in the center, but I do have to come over a little bit from the center because our birdhouse can't hang off the edge. I think I did okay. And then we'll add some adhesive on this one. Kind of going crazy here, there, and everywhere with this. There we go. Liquid glue might have been a good choice. But it takes time. And there we go. So we can add our birdhouse on here. See if we can center it. Again, it's going to overlap our photo just a little bit, but that is good. It's maintaining what's happening on this side. Now I have one more photo to add, and the photo I'm adding is actually a photo of the sign at Birdhouse City, one of the many signs. And so this is the Birdhouse City sign. It's a more modern sign than from when I was younger. And it also adds on here that it's maintained by Friends of Birdhouse City and Quinte Conservation. And I took this, printed it out, and then I actually separated it like this. So I can use this part as my title up here, and then I can add this part down at the bottom for sort of a little bit of journaling, kind of spreading it out, kind of creating a really vertical section in the center of my layout. And if you notice, this layout really doesn't have a lot of extra paper going on. So if you're the kind of person who likes less frou-frou, more photos, then this is the kind of layout you're going to want to gravitate towards. So I'm just going to line it up right at the top of those photos, and that will give us a nice little edge at the top there that kind of is also repeated at the bottom. We'll have a little bit of a gap at the bottom as well, trying to keep them even. And we're just centering it on these two middle photos here. Right like that. We've got about a 1/4 of an inch gap at the top and bottom. But I like how we've got sort of solid, massive photos, but they're kind of wandering, which is what happens in Birdhouse City. You wander from house to house, and I'm going to just tip my light to see if that will help a little bit with the glare that we're getting. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it just made everything too dark. So now we can bring in our birdies. So here is the little birdie that we cut and did that fun technique where we stamped it on a block and then stamped it on the paper. We've got some other little birdies here. Let me see. We'll maybe stick one there. And I also, if you recall, I did some that were blue. So I've got one here, and I think I might kind of try and tuck him on there so he looks like he's kind of sitting on the roof. And then I did another one the wrong direction. And so that one can sit here on the birdhouse. And then because we've got 4, we need an odd number. So I've got another one here, and I think I'll actually park him down here. So he looks like he's hopping around on the ground underneath this birdhouse. So I think those look cute where they are. So let's go ahead and stick those down. And in that die set, there's those beautiful little flowers that you can die cut out of cardstock and add them onto things. There's also the flowers that you can stamp. But I decided to keep this simple. There's not really any flowers here. There's trees and foliage, but I thought, you know what? There's a lot going on between all the photos and all the, birdhouses details, the foliage in the background. I don't think we need to add any more busyness to this layout. So we're keeping it pretty simple, just the photos, just the birdhouses, and these few stamped birds. And I think it's really cool to be able to do that. Stamping where you create the opposite direction with your image. That really kind of is a fun technique to know how to do. Now, I will caution you that it does work most times better with a smaller image. So this is a small little image. Now, if I tried to stamp, say, a large horse, I may have a bit of trouble with it just because it's hard to get all that ink and all that pressure and get a whole big thing to transfer. So it does tend to turn out better when you do something smaller. So there is our completed layout. We started with our Night of Navy cardstock as the base, just pulling that adhesive off the back there. We can use our rub and remove eraser when we're done with that to take the adhesive off so we can stick it in our album. And I love that I can use these photos. Now, to be honest, I did not take these photos. I have been to Birdhouse City quite a few times over the years, but these are not my photos. I got them off the internet. Yay for Google. Yay for places that, make a good effort to take pictures of their things. Even the Birdhouse City sign. So even if you go and you explore a place and maybe something happens with your camera, maybe your photos don't turn out, maybe your computer dies or gets stolen, right, Mom? And you suddenly don't have the photos from the place you went. You won't get photos of you in the picture, but you can at least have photos of the places that you have been. And so if that happens to you, just take advantage of Google and find some photos. And it usually gets you photos that don't have a lot of people in them. So if you're visiting a place where there's a lot of tourist activity happening or some big event, it's often quite difficult to get a nice photo of, say, a famous landmark because there's too many people. So this is a great way to do it. And then, of course, embellishing with the beautiful Country Birdhouse and the Country Woods collection, and then coloring up with those Stampin' Blend markers. I hope you enjoyed seeing this layout come together. I hope you got a few tips on how to do things, and I'm just noticing we're really out of focus. I'm going to see if I can get it to focus a little bit better. Maybe not. Maybe it's just my eyeballs. Anyway, have a wonderful rest of the afternoon. We'll be posting another game as soon as we're done here. And we will be on at 7 o'clock for Chat and Craft. We'll see you then. All right, toodaloo. Bye.